just the whole concept of, running a program, being kind of weaved into that university community. What's the family's take on all this?
Everybody's extremely excited. My son, as recent as this morning, all right, when are we going to go to Nashville? Because he's never been. And it costs money to get on the planes and go back and forth. My wife and I are actually, because this upcoming week I'll be in Nashville, and then she's coming in Friday, Saturday, so we can go look at some schools for the kids for next year. But they're itching. My wife loves the city. Didn't know what to expect, to be honest, at first, because it's the South, and it's not like the East Coast. It's not like the West Coast. It's its own thing. But she absolutely fell in love her first trip. So it's been really good.
That's so cool. I was scanning through your Twitter or X feed, and I saw a post of the uniforms just dropped, and they're awesome.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that, every day that you get up, there's a potential for a first, whether that's the first commitment, new uniforms, etc. What might have been some of the other firsts that you've experienced so far that have been really notable?
I'd say the first alum that I spoke to on campus. So there was an alumni event last June, I believe it was. It's just this big alumni convention on campus. And we got up and we spoke, and I actually got emotional on stage speaking in front of individuals that look like me that are here to support not just ice hockey, but the entire athletics department. So I really got choked up speaking to them about bringing hockey to the school. But it was after that when an older alum, she came over and she said, I just wanted to come say hello. I love the jersey. And I'm just like, I know nothing about hockey. And she grabbed my hand and pulled me closer. She said, I know absolutely nothing about hockey, but I'm happy that we're doing something different, and I'm going to need you to teach. I don't even how many people play the game. Is it
That's
cold?
so cool.
If it's it was those moments where you see how we always think, because we're immersed in hockey day in, day out, and erase color completely from the conversation. And you can probably even erase finances from the conversation. There's so many people in the world that have never experienced our sport, but we hardly really get that chance to express our love and passion for the game with somebody that's new to it. So having that opportunity was pretty awesome.
That's so cool. What do you expect? I mean, when the NHL, the Predators, and TSU announced that this program was coming, the pageantry around it was excellent, but there was a different vibe to it as well. And I remember watching that. I'm like, man, a game night at TSU is going to be a game night unlike anything we've seen. And I don't know what that is. Where are you guys going to play, and what do you think fans can expect when the puck finally drops?
So our premier games, I guess you could call, against our larger schools, bigger name, higher ranked teams will be played at Bridgestone Arena.
Really?
And then the rest of our games will be played at Fordyce Bellevue. So that's the beauty of having a program like the Predators in town. Sean Henry and everybody over at the Preds have been phenomenal. Barry Trotz, phenomenal people. They've literally not just opened the door, but they've opened the Rolodex and said, anybody that you need to be in contact with, any way that we can potentially help, not even just let us know. They're bringing ideas and opportunities to the table on a consistent basis. As recent as this morning, texts are coming in about some stuff. So that's the current plan, to practice at Centennial, which is where the Predators currently practice, which is roughly 5 to 6 minutes away from our campus. And then to play, like I say, the big games at Bridgestone whenever we can get it on the schedule. And then all of our other games will be at Fordyce Bellevue.
Got it. And I didn't realize this. Like, your campus is right in Nashville.
Yeah, it's
right in Nashville.
So I joke with some of the players.
I want to come on a recruiting visit, Duante.
Well, speaking about recruits, I was at Centennial this summer with the Predators for development camp, and I had to run over to campus for a meeting, and then I was running right back over to Centennial. I've never seen this before. It was a $5.88 Uber. I've never seen an Uber ride be that cheap. But again, it was a 4 to 5 minute drive. Might have taken 6 minutes because of a light or two that caught us. But It's really, really, really close to downtown, and also to the places where we're going to be living quite often. Speaking about the rinks.
That's awesome. So I had a couple weeks ago, we're partners with Hockey Calgary, and Jamie Henry is their director of hockey ops, and he's also an assistant coach with the Calgary Canucks. And we were having lunch, and he mentioned that their captain, Bowden Singleton, had committed to you. And so my first reaction was, oh, like that's cool. Like he's a player of color. He's like, no, he's white. And I was, and I don't know when your program was first announced, again, probably like a lot of people, just not having all the information, I had just assumed that all the players on your roster would be black. And then I started doing some research, and I saw, for example, when Deion Sanders was at Jackson, that he had white players on his team and everybody integrated. And I thought, man, like what a cool experience, and what an opportunity, a unique opportunity, not just to play hockey, but I would imagine like to, have an experience that's going to resonate for the rest of your life. When you're talking to young players, what is your recruiting pitch about, again, not just the hockey aspect, but the opportunity to come down to Nashville, which, again, as much as the Predators are there, I think it's probably still an emerging hockey market. But just play in a school environment that's going to offer them, a really unique experience.
Well, I believe it's healthy for humanity. To be honest, I've and you this story is out there, and this is a pretty deep story, but I feel like this is a great platform to be able to share this type of a story. But when I was in high school, predominantly white, Catholic school in Washington, D.C., Gonzaga College High School, proud alum, class of 2005. One of my teammates, when I was a senior, wrote me a letter. There's a retreat that you go on, and part of it is that letters are written to you by people that are close to you. And in this letter, he mentioned the fact that when he came to the school, he was racist. And he said, not racist in the way that it was, pitchforks and Ku Klux Klan type of situation, but his family had pretty much raised him to not trust or believe that black people or people of color were anything more than somebody that could potentially harm you. And this would imagine being 17, 18 years old, writing this out to one of your teammates, expressing yourself, being this
You guys
open.
played hockey together?
Played hockey together, sat next to each other
Wow.
quite often, had
Wow.
classes together, and I never knew that was his feelings. But in this letter, he goes on to say, "But Dante, you completely changed my idea of the world and of building relationships with people just the way that you are." And I had no idea I was having that impact on him. But in the reverse, he was also having an impact on me because I got to see the way he lived his life and the way that, the abundance that you can be able to achieve and cars being left unlocked. I had never seen something like you leave your car unlocked, not where I grew up. So that doesn't happen if we're not both sitting in the same room. That doesn't happen if we don't actually experience each other on a personal, intimate, like really understanding who the person is next to you. And I think that's the beauty of having hockey at an HBCU. It's not that this is the only way to live, but this is a different way of living, of being educated, of honestly becoming a man. Speaking about the men's hockey team in today's society, and I had a recruit's family. Both parents are doctors, and one is an orthopedic surgeon. And mom said to me these words: "I want my child to have this opportunity because he's going to get a worldly experience that he really can't get anywhere else with regards to hockey. He's going to develop a level of empathy that's going to carry for the rest of his life, and hopefully
Yeah.
it changes the tables that he sits in and the decisions that he makes going forward." And that's what I love about this game. Whether you're coming from Europe, whether you're coming from South Korea,
I was going to say, yeah, yeah, yeah.
whether you're wherever you're coming from, Edina, Calgary, wherever, we all get in this together. We all learn about each other. And I just watched something about Bill Riley, great coach. He's done an amazing job at Army, and he's just like he just speaks of the power of one, and that's what truly I believe in as well. So I apologize about being long winded there, but
No, that's
that's the beauty of what we're doing.
no, I think it underscores, I think anybody listening to this, and if we're involved in coaching and we're involved in, overseeing a locker room, that there is this, um, I think at times underappreciated value of whether it's, young men, as is the case with your program, or young kids, but being just that time. And that's such a unique part about hockey. And this was explained to me, and it's something I hadn't considered before. But one of the unique aspects of hockey is that dressing room environment. The kids, when kids go to soccer, they just show up and the ball's put on the field, and they go play, and that's great. That's generally the case with most sports. But hockey has this unique factor where young kids get to hang out together, and then when you get to around U11, you get to sometimes hang out there where your parents aren't around you all the time, and you get to be social and develop relationships. And I think it goes without saying that you develop maybe some stronger bonds, with the people in that locker room with you. And again, I think what a what a cool opportunity for the kids they're going to come down and play for you. What How do you talk about that power of one? You know how do you bring that group together and start a story? And I remember we had Greg Powers from ASU on, when that program transitioned, and one of the things he talked about was the opportunity to come in and write that first chapter of a program, which, again, most players never get the opportunity to do.
Well, I'd say thankfully the chapter has kind of already been written before I was even hired. Just the fact that a school that traditionally hasn't been involved in a sport like ice hockey says we've seen that ice hockey has grown to a point where not only do we appreciate it as an institution, but the world appreciates it at a level that they just haven't. So we want to be at the forefront of what's coming in the future. So we want to offer something that we believe our students can benefit from. It's an experience that they just wouldn't get at any other HBCU. So they've already laid the groundwork that we want to be trailblazers. And that's what I want, from our recruits and hopefully our potential players, is trailblazing characteristics, individuals that want to get out in the community, individuals that want to leave their mark on this world. If I could put, captains on everybody, obviously I can't, but those are the type of people, if you really look at the recruits that I'm going after, there's a lot of captains, and there's a reason for it, because that leadership, that, again, that trailblazing mentality is something that we truly value.
Well, as I mentioned, that conversation with Jamie Henry and talking about Bowden Singleton, and he echoed exactly what you just said, that this is an exceptional young man, a leader. How have you gone about evaluating? There's obviously the on ice component, but the off ice component of bringing in players that are going to, really set the culture for your program, for long after they eventually leave the program.
Well, that starts with obviously the first conversation, with the athlete, and actually, I'll go back on that. It starts with the first viewing of the athlete. Once their name come across my once my their name comes across my desk, then that's when I obviously go and take a look at the athlete, and you can tell just by their little habits, how they
Yeah.
hound pucks. If they're down 6-1, how they behave in those situations. Are they still the same player when they're down versus when they're up? Are they still the same person when they just got off the ice and somebody else scores a goal versus them, getting the game win and tapping on the back door? Like how do they handle being healthy scratched? So calling the Zamboni driver, calling the coach, calling the parents, possibly even of other players. Like you have to just ask the questions. But
Yeah.
I truly believe in your gut usually being right. If you have a good feeling about a player or an athlete, one viewing, two viewing, three viewings, you pretty much know who the player is, whether or not they're going to be able to work within your system. And typically, one conversation, they'll tell you exactly who it is that they are. It's just up to you to truly believe it.
Got it. I hadn't considered this, but you're going to have access to the transfer portal, as you build your team, and this is probably just more curiosity around roster building. But how do you weigh how many new faces to bring in versus how much room you leave for players, experienced players that might be available to you, at the conclusion of the season?
Well, that was even in my interview pitch. I knew exactly the type of team that I wanted to build. Um, if you're going to be a healthy scratch and you are a freshman or so, having that experience, but also having the leadership abilities to understand that this is for the team. I think it's a lot easier to swallow in that situation versus if you're a top six guy your entire life, maybe you're an assistant captain, you put up all the
Yeah.
points, and now you're, the 15th of 15 forwards. You're like, all right, what's going on here? So making sure that I attack the right individuals, but looking at potential growth of the incoming freshmen, 04s and 05s, of can they grow into what it is that I think they can be in the future? And honestly, what type of help does that group of incoming freshmen need to become who I believe they can become in 2, 3, 4 years? Those are the players that I'll be looking at in the portal. Not necessarily who can just help us on the ice this year, but who can help our locker room become what it needs to be in the future, whether that's December, January of our first year or not until the playoffs in their senior season. That's my goal in the portal.
You mentioned the interview process, and I can only imagine if I put myself in your shoes, like when because I do sense that this was, this program launching. There wasn't, at least through my lens, there wasn't a lot of tailwind. Meaning, it just sort of all of a sudden this announcement came, and you're like, holy cow, this is like really cool. When it came across your radar, how did you go about preparing yourself to stand out and maybe um, connect with the uniqueness of this opportunity? And I think that and I ask because this comes up so much where there's not a school you go to for the interview process. And I think that it's one of those things where coaches there's that fear of maybe doing too much, but there's certainly that fear of not being prepared enough as well.
Yeah. Well, before I jump into the coach's side of the interview, that's one thing. That's a bit of advice that I would give to every coach out there. If you have athletes that are still in the developmental path, meaning they are playing college all the way down to entry level, have interviews. Like utilize the other coaches in your organizations after a game. Don't let the players know because most players show up now in their suits, and I love it. But just see how they handle walking out of a locker room. And yes, it's a coach that they know, but hey, Johnny, can you come over here? I just have a couple questions for you, and
It's a
put
great
them
idea.
through a mock interview right after a game, and then grade them on and talk to them about it later in the week. That way, when they get into those situations, when they are in midget or juniors or even college and talking to professional teams, they've worked that moment so many times that they're so comfortable in it and expressing who it is that they are and actually truly understanding who it is that they are, not having to put on a show. So that's the coaches that have athletes in that,
Yeah,
like I say, in that developmental somewhere on that in that journey. But from a
great
coach's
call out.
standpoint, yeah, from a coach's standpoint, I think it was this was a presentation that Woody did at the draft a couple years ago, I believe. But I wanted him to delve a little bit deeper into it. Was how does a head coach put someone through an interview process, and then from the interviewee, how do they approach the interview? So when it came to this, I was actually in Nashville when it was announced because I was still with the Maple Leafs, and I was there for the draft, and I was extremely excited for the opportunity just to be had in the hockey space. I had heard about the feasibility study in the past, but this was something that was actually coming to fruition before my very own eyes. But then I didn't get a call until mid-December. I had heard some rumblings that I was probably going to get contacted about the position, but I was still wanted to be sure about the direction as far as like the level of play of the school. But when the call came from Nick Guerrero, who's the director of hockey ops and is also the AD of communications at the school, and was tasked with helping to put together pretty much the framework for the program and to hire a head coach and steward of the program. Um, when that call came, I was ready. I attended an HBCU, met my wife at an HBCU. Hockey, obviously, you can look at me, wasn't a traditional sport for somebody from the inner city of Washington, D.C. So I knew this opportunity about as closely as you possibly can. It really did feel like it was God ordained. One of those situations, like,
I
all right,
bet.
everything I've done to this point, coaching youth hockey, coaching college, working in the NHL, has led to this. So I just looked at my wife and she was like, this is yours. You can't take any other job. This is what you are supposed to do. in the future. So just go full at it, and we'll move to Nashville. And here we are.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Um, how did you get introduced to hockey?
So that started. That's my mom. She just wanted her children to do something a little different. I was her only son at that time. She had me when she was 19, just going on 20. So 2 years or 2 months before her 20th birthday. Was off to college, got pregnant, moved back home.
Yeah.
My dad ended up getting locked up, just dumb stuff in the streets in Washington D.C. in the late '80s. You don't know what I'm talking about? You can look it up. It's all over the news. The type of stuff that was out there,
Yeah.
and she didn't want me around that. She didn't want her child to become a statistic, just as she was. Having a child before she turned 20, being a teenage mother, but she also broke another statistic and bought a house before she was 30 as a single mother too. So that's something that she's extremely proud of, and I'm proud of her for it. She was
What's
a
your
great
mom's
example.
name?
Deborah Abercrombie. She knew that she wanted something different. She was studying occupational therapy at Howard University, so I was the guinea pig. I was the infant walking on the little wood panels to see if my balance was good, like that. That was me. I was in school, my cousin and I, and from there she gained an appreciation for challenging outside of the norm. So gymnastics was something that I did. Now again, entry level gymnastics. So balance beam, a little bit of uneven bars, some trampoline stuff, and that was about it. I'm not Simone Biles or anybody like that. I was very, very entry level. But again, building the body, building your athleticism, but also looking around the room and feeling comfortable in a room that looks nothing like you and you don't care one bit. So it was that. It was violin, and learn to skate was something else that she put me in, because there's only one rink inside what we call the Beltway in Washington D.C. At least at that time,
Yeah.
at Fort Dupont. And I did a learn to skate class every Saturday. Saw an ice hockey game after one of my sessions and looked up at her and said, I want to try that. She walked over to the front desk and said, how can we get him involved in something like that? And they introduced me to Coach Neil Henderson's program, the Fort DuPont Cannons, and the passion, I guess you could say, just grew from there. And that's what I loved about Fort DuPont when it came to my experience. I looked left, I looked right, I looked across from me. My entire team was Black, BIPOC, from diverse situations. Some people had a ton of money, parents driving up in Mercedes Benz and their lawyers in the city, and others literally walking from gunshot ridden or gunshot laden
Wow.
neighborhoods right across the street, but we're all in the same room. We all get to just learn and love the game with each other. So I didn't experience any racial tension in the game until I got to high school. And that's not saying it was in our locker room, because it definitely wasn't. We were a very accepting school and team. But as far as when we went out to play other schools, that was the first time that I ever experienced racism on the ice. But I had already built, let's just call it, 8 years of experience to that point of this was my game. So anybody said it wasn't, yeah, you have no idea what you're talking about, because it was for the past 8 years, and it still is.
Oh man, I have so many questions. One, I feel like we should get your mom on the podcast, because that concept of exposing your kids to different things, and I think that so much value in that, but just specifically for athlete development, I think more parents need to hear that. I want to ask you this. So I grew up with a single mom, and I think about this a lot. I'm like, I don't think, given the landscape of hockey today, specifically the cost, time commitments, etc. Like, I just I don't know how my mom would have enabled me to play hockey today, but I know she would have, because she would have known that I loved it and she would have figured it out. But you've got two kids, correct?
Three as of 2 months ago.
Oh wow. Okay, so you're in
Yeah.
it. You're in it, man.
Oh, I'm trust me, I'm right in it. I don't know what sleep is, but I definitely know what coffee is.
Yeah, I bet you do. But do you ever have moments when you're like just just for your wife's out with her girlfriends or doing something, you're alone with the kids, where you have this moment, you're like, how did my mom do this for by herself for my whole life?
Often, and it's
Same
it's
here.
even
Yeah.
to the point, I just turned 37, or not just turned 37. I'm 37. I'll be 38 in February. But my mom having me at 19, you could do the math. She's
Yeah.
my age, having a child graduate from high school. She's
Yeah.
sitting in meetings at this private school in Washington, D.C. with the chef of the White House, that like literally the head chef of the White House. His son was on my team, and different lawyers and powerful people. And as far as advocating for your child at that age, like, I just couldn't believe or can't believe that she did it. And it was waking up on Saturday doing hair. It was working 2 to 3 jobs. Obviously, she was an OT, like I said, but she worked at a hospital. She did visiting nursing stuff. Like, but that's what children need to see. Whether your parents are extremely white collar and make a ton of money, they need to see you work. They need to see what you do. Otherwise, it's where's the appreciation for the hard work? If it's all right, we're going to show up. I'm going to put your skates on. You get on the ice. You whirl around. You have a good time. I'm going to take no. Let your kid tie their skates. Let your kid carry their bag from time to time. Like that's let them experience work at a young age. So when they get hit with some adversity, whether it's at 7 years old, 17, or 70, like it's they've been sharpened. They know how to push through because they've seen you do it. They've experienced it, and they know they can do it
Yeah.
again in the future.
Yeah. The
But
Fort.
kudos and hats off to your mom too.
No, man, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. The Fort Dupont cannons. Um, as an aside, if anybody hasn't watched the documentary The Cannons on Neil Henderson, put that on your watch list this weekend. It's outstanding and will have a real impact on how you view your role as a coach. Um, I didn't realize that the program went right down to younger kids. So when you first got introduced, can you maybe just talk about the mechanics? Because obviously there's ice time, you need gear, etc. How did that program kind of bring you in and enable you to not just play but be a part of a team?
Well, the first thing Coach Neil Henderson does is give you a hug and lets you know that he loves you, and that's every day that you come from practice to the very first. I mean, starting with the very first time that you meet him. But then he took us down into the bowels of the rink where he had this closet, and it was just lined with equipment, all donated equipment, all equipment that he um, maintained on his own, stitching it up, make sure that all the skates are sharpened, and nothing matched. But you were handed. I can't make. It's just literally Mighty Ducks one, where they are
No way.
just dripping in other people's former clothes. But that's the beauty of it, because here it is. What was trash for somebody else really brought somebody else to the game. But that's a whole other thing. So you get your first bit of clothing. The first thing you start with is just your skates and gloves, or skates, helmets, and gloves, so that you can just learn to move around on the ice. I still remember going to, I think it was Sports Authority or something like that back in the day, getting my purple duffel bag, getting a athletic supporter. First time I ever wore one, in a cup. Like that was a whole other thing.
Yeah.
But then you graduate, and there's moments of celebration. So say you go out and you get your stick and gloves. So you start with helmet and skates. Sorry, you don't have your stick and gloves yet when you start, but you graduate to stick and gloves. There's this ceremony after practice, because there's always a meeting after practice, and it says, all right, just today, this person, Aaron Wilbur, he's graduating the stick and gloves, and everybody claps it up and gets so excited. Aaron Wilbur tonight graduated from stick and gloves to full gear. Everybody clap. Graduated to the travel team. Like there's
And how old are you when all this is going on?
so I'm 5 when I start.
No way.
Again, I'm pretty
Was
sure
that
I'm
typical, like 5, 6, like around that age?
five, 6. But then there's also people that start in high school. But
Wow.
everybody starts in skates and helmets, and you're all bunched in the same group. So imagine somebody that's a lineman on a football team, and a 5-year-old kid. Didn't matter. Like you're all out there learning this sport, learning to push your boundaries and step outside of the norm together. But I'm telling you, that team and that sense of family it was just different. It was so unique and awesome. And I really hope everybody has an experience like that within hockey. But there was no true graduation from just learn to play or recreational to a true travel game schedule experience, because everybody was on the same ice at the same time. Um, and I think that's the one thing that
Like
I
all
know
ages are on the ice at the same time.
everybody,
So
the
I
entire
imagine the
program.
mentorship when you're 5 years old and you've got kids that are, I don't know, like a teenagers, they're tapping their sticks and they're pumped for you. Like that's gotta
So I
It
had
means something.
individuals that I looked up to, Ralph Featherstone being one, and I'll use his example because this is actually a really good one. Ralph was a really good hockey player in my eyes at Fort Dupont. And then he graduated from the program, graduated high school and went
Yeah.
off to the Naval Academy.
No
At the
way.
Naval Academy, he walked on to the team. They said, "Hey, you're coming from Fort Dupont. You didn't really play any travel. More than likely, you can't make this team." Fast forward 4 years, he's the captain of the team
Come
at Naval.
on.
And he comes back and he presents Coach Neil Henderson his white Navy jersey. And I still remember where I sat. I still remember seeing that. And at that moment, I'm like, here's a black
'Cause
guy
you're
from the
still a
neighborhoods
kid.
that I'm from. Still a kid.
Yeah.
I don't know how, maybe 8 years difference
Yeah.
in age. But I remember seeing that, saying this guy played in college. He was a captain. This is something that I can also achieve. I can do great things in this sport. And it just, I really gave everything that I possibly could, or everything that I knew to give, to being the best player and person that I possibly could, because Ralph Featherstone did it. So shouts out to you, Ralph.
Two things. One, there's a great scene in the documentary, and I'm paraphrasing here, but Neil Henderson basically says he's like, I get up every day and I think about how I can help somebody else. I start doing the math, and when you're growing up and you're a kid, and I'm a little bit older, but we're not too far apart in age. And I'm thinking like at that stage of life in society, when you talk about you come to the rink and Neil Henderson gives you a hug and gives every player a hug, I could just see where I'm just as you said it, I'm like, man, I'm trying to think of the first time like a coach or somebody would have given me a hug like that would have happened and not and I'm like, I think today for anybody that is a nerd like me and takes time out of their day to go watch YouTube videos of like locker room speeches and how coaches interact with their athletes and stuff, like society's changing. Like it's okay for two guys to give each other a hug and say I love you. Like I was just the other day just did a group chat with some coaches sharing like Dan Campbell from the Detroit Lions breaking down his locker room after a big win in Houston. But how impactful in hindsight do you think it was for you to be able just to show up anywhere, let alone a rink, and for a mentor, somebody to say, hey, give you a hug and say I love you and you're welcome here. And
Well,
it's not
Coach
because
Neil,
you scored a goal or did anything special.
he's I'm telling you, he's a beautiful human being. He's hard, he's honest, he's extremely fair. But one thing everybody would say is that he truly cares about everybody that he comes in contact with, and wants them to be the best version of themselves. But that level of care and vulnerability, and you speak about that super macho, almost toxic masculinity that has
Yeah.
been prevalent, not just in ice hockey, but in
Everywhere.
sports in general in the past, in high achieving situations in the past, is a thing of the past, thankfully, because that's not how you want to live life. At least that's not how I want to live life. But thankfully, I had somebody like Neil Henderson as an example very early on to show you that vulnerability is important. Caring about the person next to you almost more than you care about yourself is so important. And that's actually a really good. So Jake Muzzin was the first person I met when I coached with the Leafs, and he immediately brought me in, and I was like, I know why this guy won. I know why he won. Kyle Clifford is another one that we had a night out and talked and all this other stuff, and he was like, when you have true team bonding and you really grow as a team, when you want the individual to win more than you want to win, that's when you give yourself a chance. And I don't mean just, oh yeah, I want you to do well. No, I know the crap you're going through at home. I know the issues with your kids' school. I know the issues with your parents and their health struggles. I know how you've had to go from team to team to team to team. I want you to win so damn bad. I'm putting my teeth in front of pucks because you deserve an opportunity to put a trophy above your head. Like
Yeah.
that selflessness that you didn't take from hockey to every other aspect of your life, being a great parent, being a great spouse, being a great business owner, or whatever it is you decide to do, you learn it through this sport if you have great examples. And then on the other hand, if you have terrible examples, that's where the terrible examples that we see on the news and everywhere else come from. And I'm not a perfect person. I'm not going to poo-poo
Yeah.
on anybody that has issues. I'm all about redemption and reconciliation. But the only way that we truly grow is, one, we make mistakes, we learn from them, and then also we learn from the individuals that are being great examples for us.
No, man, that's so well said. And, I think about this a lot too, that, certainly, probably when we were growing up, and I can remember when I first got into coaching, like it was a strategy in some cases to make sure every player in your locker room was scared of you. Like
Hmm.
that was intentional. And I'm just like, man, like I mean, just knowing how much joy you get out of the game and getting out of coaching now, like I can't imagine, that being the mindset that a leader would have walking the
It's a
locker
true weakness. I think you're not a leader. You're weak. If that's what you do, and I think it's showing your athletes that you truly don't know everything that you say you know, and you're using that scare tactic to try to keep them away from exposing your deficiencies, whether it's as a coach or as a person. And that's something that we cannot be afraid of as coaches and leaders, because you said it perfectly earlier, like the joy that you see these coaches, and then if you look across the room, the connection that they have with each player as they're giving their speech and as they're being emotional. Everybody's so dialed in, everybody's so locked in, the lessons being learned by everybody. So all of those individuals are going to now take that lesson to the rest of the world, and that's how it spreads. I do and this is something else. 'Cause I know this is for coaches. This is something else that I'm actually stole from my wife. She's an educator. Melanie, I love you, and everything that you do for us and our family. Um, she's a history teacher in high school, and one thing she does at the beginning of the year is put three things down on a sheet of paper that you want what used to be Miss Moore, now Miss Abercrombie, to know about you. And that way she knows more about those students, and they hand them in, and then she knows more. I take it to my team, and I take it a little bit of a step further. We do it publicly, but it's three things that you want the team to know if you could remain anonymous. So I get up and I say, I'm Duante Abercrombie, interviewee on the Glass and Out podcast, and I am struggling with this. My parent is dealing with this, and at school, I have issues when it comes to this. And we go around the entire room,
So
but it's
you've done this.
anonymous. Oh, I've done this. I've done this numerous times. I've done this with a lot of different organizations. And I'm
Wow.
telling you, the stuff that comes out, because it's anonymous, but you now know that this is what's living in this room. These are the true things that we are battling with on a personal level in this room. And I'm talking conversations about sexuality have come out through
Yeah.
this, conversations about parents having cancer, conversations about the pressure of just being in this elite space of AAA or prep school or higher level hockey, and even up to like the National League level. I'm not going to say which organization,
Yeah.
but the direction of the program and the direction of their life, and the struggle of this is going to kill my relationship and my family. Like all of this comes out. And I've had so many people come up to me afterwards and say, what you did today has so much more of an impact than anything we've really ever thought about doing in the past. But it starts with the coach. I always give my three, but I give it publicly. I let them know exactly what my three are. This is what I'm dealing with. This is something that I'm struggling with or have had happen to me. And that's what opens the room. You have to lead with vulnerability first as the coach, and then it runs from there.
I want to make that's amazing. I just want to make sure, just for everybody listening, we get this clear. So the you as the coach speaks, um, shares your own story. Um, but then the players, do they say their own, or does somebody else just read, I guess, the submissions from the group?
So each player comes up, grabs one of them out of a hat.
Got it. Okay.
So they're reading
Wow.
something
Wow.
as their teammate, but they don't know
Unscripted.
which
They don't even
teammate
know
it is.
what's on that sheet.
They have no idea.
Holy shit. Wow. Wow. I appreciate you sharing that, man.
Yep. That exercise usually ends in tears, in a good way. And
Yeah.
most teams usually get brought
That
together. And a
one.
lot of the issues that coaches face
Yeah.
are gone after that.
I bet. I bet. You talked about the ceremony that Neil would have when players graduated. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm going to caution myself because I was at an event last week, and somebody mentioned, like, man, you talk about your kid a lot on the podcast, and I'm like, I get it. I don't know how not to, right? But because it's what I'm going through. But my little guy, he's turning 6 this weekend. He's in a Kaido It's like a martial art. I don't know really how to describe it amongst the martial art. And Graham, the sensei of this program, is just, he's amazing. Like like kids walk in unprompted, they bow, they listen. I mean, you've got little kids. Kids don't listen. Kids don't sit still. Well, they do it here. And so what they do is they've got, you get your belts, which I think everybody's probably familiar with. So you get like white belt, yellow belt, orange belt, etc. But then you get these stripes. So as they achieve certain things, and it's not just the physical stuff. It's, you know, how they show up, how they listen, how they treat others, etc. They get these stripes. And so my son finally got enough stripes that he got to test for his yellow belt. He was so excited, but I kept coming back to this thing. I'm like, there's a magic in this place, but a big part of it is this idea of having this ceremony, because we get, as parents, we get to go watch this, you know, him go through this evaluation for his yellow belt. But, you know, my wife's, you know, she's crying, but I'm watching the other kids and I'm like, all the other kids are just sitting there still as church mice watching this. They're not making a peep. And I'm like, wow, how do they do that? But it's the ceremony. They had gone through it before. There was a level of respect. And so I've just been thinking about that a lot, the importance of ceremonies, and having those, you know, being intentional about having an appreciation for the things that maybe don't always get celebrated within a team environment. You know, not scoring a goal, not getting an assist, not winning, but just the behaviors and the habits that lead to, you know, a great culture.
Yeah, I was just watching some videos the other day, and I love the just in hockey locker rooms how there's always something that's given out, and I know that I'm not even going to speak to the items that are given out because
Yeah.
each team is different.
You're
Everybody's
talking like the
story.
wrestling belts, the hard hats, etc. Yeah.
Yep. I remember in Newfoundland we had a firefighter's hat because the captain of the team was a firefighter. So every city that we went to in the playoffs, we tried to get a like an actual firefighter's helmet from that city, and that's what was handed out for a playoff victory. But Spencer Carberry, I remember when he first took over in the Caps, and we sat next to each other for that entire year that I was with the Leafs, and it was such a beautiful thing to see the way that team came together, and he celebrates everybody. Now he doesn't actually get to everybody in the room, but he pulls out the smallest details, you know, celebrating birthdays, block shots, great changes, great support, great back. He celebrates everything because that's just who he is naturally. He cares and he knows that that matters. It's uncomfortable at first. You're like, all right, how am I going to give this speech? Make sure I say the right, but no, just go for it. Just
Yeah.
literally find instances and ways to celebrate people. Because we're going through this with my son. He's a high flyer. The kid is extremely intelligent, and the principal made it a point to get the quote unquote high flyers together in one space and their parents and say you are not forgotten, because people always like it's easy to just focus on one group in schools, but he said I
Yeah.
want to make sure that you all know that you're seen and we're doing stuff so that you all can stay who it is that you need to stay. Because yeah, the top scorer usually always gets celebrated, but what about the person that made the pass? What about the person that made the outlet to start the rush up the ice? What about the goaltender that made the save, put the puck in the right spot? Like those little details, finding a way to celebrate everybody, not just those people at the top, or not just the people that you always have to work with in practice, but touch on all of it. And if you're in youth hockey, the parents, don't forget the parents. One,
That's
because
a
it's going
great
to make
call.
your life a lot easier. But two, thank you for getting them there on time. Thank you for the stuff that you do. And have the players go out and thank that individual parent. Give them a parent of the game award. Like it's pretty easy to figure it out. And you spread it out over the team. Like you have to find ways to be different and bring everybody in.
You know, just dawns on me as you were sharing that story, and you know, Spencer's one of those people. that everybody that I know that's come across him, from the video coaches to, assistants or people that played with him or for him down in South Carolina, speaks so highly of him. And it's all the attributes that you just mentioned on it's the stuff that's free. It's the human side of the game. You spent time with the Leafs, and I know you were with Nashville Development Camp. Maybe.
Yeah, so I did. First thing was Arizona for training camp slash dev camp the year after COVID, which was great. They did a feature on it called NHL Bound, which was pretty cool. Which was actually something that I started when I was trying to play. That's a whole other conversation. But
Yeah.
the director there, Kwame Brown, said we want to do this with the National Hockey League. So that was my first inside the room opportunity with the National Hockey League, and then that was from there. It was like, I'm going for this. And then I did the Boston scouting program in that same year. And then I got the opportunity to work with the Maple Leafs for that full year as a coaching development associate. And then Mike Greer has said, anytime I ever wanted to come out for training camp or anything like that, just let him know. So I got time to go out there and spend time with Quinny and his staff. Wasowski was on that.
So two things on this. None of this happens without you putting your hand up and saying, "Hey, I'd like to take advantage of this opportunity." And I think sometimes, particularly in our sport, particularly with coaches, sometimes we're afraid to put our hand up and get that mentorship and get that opportunity that ultimately is only going to make us better. What would you say to, and again, this could look, any number of circumstances. I mean, I've got, Derek Lalonde starts his career out as a graduate assistant, which probably in the moment wasn't, maybe the best, economical decision in his life, but obviously it's worked out. But just what would you say to any coaches to say, hey, like, go get your reps in, don't miss out on an opportunity to learn from people that are more experienced, and kind of put yourself in the arena, and put yourself out there.
I think it's what we ask of our players, and it's something that we have to continue to practice on a daily basis. It's putting yourself out there professionally, not being afraid to cold call somebody, cold email somebody, just walk up to somebody and say hello. I remember Manny Malhotra at the Vancouver draft did a presentation, an amazing
Yep.
presentation
Remember that.
on pre-scouting. He's a phenomenal job, full of humor and everything. I sat right in the front, and after he was finished, there weren't too many other obviously coaches of color, so I wanted to make sure I went up there and just said hello. But again, this is Manny Malhotra, one of the
Yep.
best face-off men in all of history.
Yeah.
Somebody I studied when I was trying to play. And as you're walking over, at first you're like, "Oh, I can do this," and then it starts to hit you. The anxiety starts to creep in. The hands get clammy. You make sure you don't want to stumble over your words. And I get this little thing where I kind of like shake when I'm nervous. Like my body gets cold. It is what it is. But you still have to do it. So I shake his hand. I talk to him. I ask him about the transition from being a player to a coach, just something that I truly wanted to know. And then fast forward many years later, we end up sitting next to each other. Carberry, I met at the exact same event. We ended up having coffee for 45 minutes. It was supposed to only be a quick, hey, meet, grab a coffee, and then walk back to the hotel because he had a plane to catch. But my good buddy Cole Bell, his family set up the meeting because Carbs and his family are pretty close. We sat there for an hour or so and we exchanged information. He said, you ever need anything, just let me know. And everybody's heard that before. And then you
Yeah.
never call. Call these people, text these people, but make sure that it's for a reason. Something that he brought up in that conversation. And it was the way that he wanted to play in Hershey, attached F3, this whole thing. So when I see this happening in the National Hockey League, I send him a clip. Is this what you were speaking about? I saw this, and it's
Yeah.
starting to happen a little bit more often. He's like, yeah, that's exactly it. But then also take a look at this, and this is what sets it up. Then that's how you build a dialogue. And I'm not saying you message them every day or every week or even every month. But when it feels right, again, like I spoke earlier, trust your gut. Just send the message. I reached out to a donor yesterday just because my gut said call right now. They were in the car and we talked for 35 minutes. Like that's, but you have to get used to just doing that. So that would be my advice to coaches. One, put yourself out there. But two, once you put yourself out there, you've built that connection and they say, email me, call me, text me, whatever. Make sure you do it, but make sure it's something of value that you're bringing to the table and something you're truly inquisitive or you want to know about versus, hey, I just want to say that I got this person's number and have it pop up on my in my thread. Like
For
that
sure.
that's self-serving.
No, that's that. I mean, listen, man, that's a great definition, I think, of just networking. I know you mentioned Todd Woodcroft's presentation that he did years ago. And I think that was at the draft as well. But I
Yep,
think
draft
just
in Nashville.
yeah, defining that is um, so important. And it's a skill set. It's a skill set, just like being able to draw X's and O's on a whiteboard. I think it's part of the coach's toolbox today. When you look at all these experiences that you've had in the National Hockey League, if you were to write a sort of how-to manual, and I mean, the F3 example is great, but what might be some of the other non-technical skills that you've acquired or observed that you feel are going to serve you well in your current role?
Handling players and their emotions, I think, would be one of the biggest things, and not just the emotions around like just the game and celebrations and all of that, but when a player's truly in a slump, when a player's dealing with, we can go two different ways: the birth of a child or the death of a parent. Like, how do you help them through that? Because the game doesn't stop; the game continues. The team is still showing up, getting off the bus, and ready to take it to your team. How do you prepare them in those moments? What are your individual touches like? What is the communication like amongst your coaching staff? I think Manny and Sheldon do a really good job of shortening meetings. Like, they're quick. Like, Schultz moves through his meetings like bang, 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 but make sure that everything is readily or digestible. So
Yeah.
you're not overloading them and you're not cutting it too short where they don't get the point of what it is that you want, but really quickening what it is you're trying to present them with, because you'll lose them 45 seconds to a minute and a half. That's when people start to float. So,
Can I ask a question about that?
yep.
In those meetings, how many points would he try and make? Like, would it be like, here's a few on the PK, here's the power play, but then here's something else? Or is it like, hey, we got one, we want to leave here with one objective?
Yes, you Shelds or Manny? Sheldon?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Kiefer's, like, the pregame is, I'm pretty sure it's been documented places before, but it hits on everything. You hit what we need to do, what we plan to see them do, and how we honestly just take advantage of it. Like, the pre-scout, a lot of teams do that exact same way, so I can't give out all of Sheld's
Sure.
stuff,
Yeah.
but
No, no.
everybody has their. You have your morning pre-scout meeting that's driven by one or two people, and then you have your power play, your PK, and then you have your evening pre-scout, which is just a reminder of what you spoke about earlier, probably much shorter. And then you have your pre-game. This is what we got to hit. This, whatever moment it is this night. A person's homecoming, meaning you're playing in their hometown, or celebration of Hockey Fights Cancer or something like that. Remembering what this is tonight, and then off on the ice you go. But it was the timing that I saw. It was the way I've seen him drive, meaning he's on the computer doing it himself, and I've also seen him speak to it as Sam Kim is driving, and that's something that you also see in other places. I remember Quinny. I don't think he drove at all during training camp. I think it was driven by the video coaches, but it's all rehearsed. I think that's something that a lot of coaches don't know happens behind the scenes, and I believed in it before I got there. That's why I hope this isn't like an epiphany for most, but if it is, I'm happy to share it. Seeing individuals actually there rehearsing and this is Maple Leafs, Marlies, Growlers, Sharks, Preds. This is stuff that I picked up everywhere. Pulling their presentation together, and actually you can hear them speaking it out and drawing, and this is what I'm going to draw here, and this is how much time. So when you get up there, you're pretty much just regurgitating what it is
Autopilot.
that you have
Yeah.
already practiced.
That's so
So yeah,
important.
I had an opportunity to present pre-scouts to the Marlies and Growlers, and then do a ton of stuff there, and then help build the pre-scouts for the Leafs, and then present those to Manny. So that's something I feel very comfortable in doing nowadays, but that I wouldn't be nearly as comfortable if I didn't have that experience.
What did you learn about, being on the ice at, say, development camp? And, I think one thing that's really unique about your background, and we haven't even talked about, your experience in youth hockey, but I think the fact that, I think there's just me personally, I look back, man, if I had started out coaching kids, I would have been a way better coach at, say junior or college hockey, just because you appreciate those fundamentals and the steps that it takes. But working on the ice with players, what have you picked up, be it from the players themselves or just, the other coaches that you've been working alongside?
Every player, no matter whether you are 5 years old or you are Mark Giordano, every player wants to still get better. And if you have done the work and you've shown that you've done the work, hey, second period, second shift, when you went down for that retrieval, the reason why that bump didn't work out is because you didn't shoulder check the way we have spoken about in the pre-scout. We mentioned it, and obviously the game is fast, but now they are like, okay, he's watched my shifts. He wants to come in and work on something specific that's going to help me be a better player and hopefully potentially keep me in the lineup longer and allow me to make more money to support my family. So once you have done the work, it doesn't matter who you are, the players will listen to you and want to work with you. But also, don't spend too much time on it. They want to get in, they want to get their work done, and they want to get out because they are professional athletes and they don't want to tax their bodies too much.
Yeah.
But in season, that's more so in season. Dev camp,
Sure.
those athletes are coming in. Most of them are junior players or college players that are coming in and their eyes are wide. They're at the National Hockey League. They want to make a good impact. They're always doing the right thing. They're shaking hands. They're opening
Yeah.
doors because they want to leave that lasting impression that there's somebody that this organization should invest in. But you want to make sure that they leave with something tangible and something that can truly help their development. So again, but that comes down to the research. So when you get,
Yeah.
so take the Predators. You're going to go in for the Preds. Take a look at everybody that they've drafted in the past few years. Take a look at the list of players that they already have announced that are coming to Dev Camp. Do a quick little study, 5 or 6 shifts on each player to kind of understand who they are, what they can do, and how you feel like you can help them. That way, when you touch the ice, and I'm not saying you're going to be able to remember all of it, but once you see them move, you're like, oh, that's the player that did this. Now you can use that, and it builds a relationship quicker too. They trust you a lot quicker in that way too.
Totally. Totally. And I think what's great, I mean, I think just with technology now, I mean, that is what you just described there is more and more accessible to coaches at all levels. When I look at your background, Dante, like, man, I mean, you've worn a lot of different hats, and it's, trying to put it together chronologically. But I know you've spent a lot of time with the Washington Capitals Rising Stars program, and that program. I think my understanding is that it's driven by Ted Leonis, who I, you know I believe is one of those owners that maybe gets it and understands the platform that they have. And a lot of boxes get checked in professional sports. I sense that he's somebody that's doing it for the right reasons and it matters. But can you maybe just talk about that role, both in terms of the impact it had on the kids, but perhaps the impact it had on you as well, just as a coach, technically working with kids, who are very much in the infancy of their careers.
Yeah, well, Ted Leonsis is an amazing human being, somebody that knows what it's like to work hard, and he supported my career from afar, obviously with helping with for Dupont and funding a lot of that program. So
Yeah,
he's somebody that I owe
I didn't
my
know
career
that.
to.
That's wow.
Oh yeah, Ted Leonsis has been intimately involved with the program. They donate money every single year to keep that
Wow.
program afloat. Um, but back to, I guess, Rising Stars, that came from the Washington Capitals seeing that this is something that is needed in the DC area. We want to help this specific group of people in DC. So young BIPOC players that have already entered the sport and are playing the game, and most of them are playing AAA, AA level in the Washington D.C. area. But how do we get them to the next level? That was always something. I'm on the Black Hockey Committee with the Capitals, so this is kind of a branch out of myself and Peter Robinson with the Capitals. But how do we give the knowledge to that group of athletes? So we came up with the idea, Rising Stars. We were only expecting 20 to, on the high end, maybe 50 athletes in the Washington, D.C. area to reach out that fit the criteria that we had
Yeah.
laid out. We had over 150 reach out in our
Wow.
first year. And we
What
were
year
minded.
was that? When was year one?
This was the year two that just passed. So not this
Okay.
past August, but the August before that was our first in-person activation, and it's one of those moments where you're overwhelmed. I'm not even saying almost overwhelmed. You are completely overwhelmed with the talent that's there, the just everything that showed up that day, the support from the Caps, the support from the local media, the support from our partners, um, eventually support from players. Like Ovi surprised some of them this past year
No
and
way.
put the jersey on. Like that's what the hockey community does. But the athletes come to us afterwards and they say, this is something that I've never received this level of communication, because it wasn't just on the ice. We did on the ice components, but we did culinary arts to help them start to understand that when you go and play junior hockey, or hopefully you play college or pro, you're going to need to learn what it is that you're going to put in your body. So we have Chef JoJo, who's done some stuff with the Anaheim Ducks, and obviously the Rising Stars, come and do just a quick stir fry example, something that these kids can actually take back home with them. We've had Angela James and some other individuals come in and speak to the athletes. So they're getting an experience from people that look like them, that love the sport the way they do. So when they leave, they get to take that love and that experience with them for the rest of their time. But Rising Stars is truly something, because I'm at that point in my life, and I feel like you are too. Impact, legacy, like those are things that I think about often.
Yeah,
When I'm dead
totally.
and gone, hopefully many, many, many years from now, when I'm laying in that box, I hope that people look back and say that Dante helped make a difference, not just in hockey, but in the world through hockey. And this is just one of those ways. So thanks to the Washington Capitals Teleon system. We're not done yet. There's some bigger things coming down the pipe too.
Have you passed the torch there to somebody else that's going to run with that program?
Yeah, so I'm still going to stay heavily involved, but obviously moving to Nashville, Brian King, who is like a little brother to me. And when I say like a little brother, he's obviously been to my wedding. We talk often, but we grew
Yeah.
up right down the street from each other. Like
No
he and
way.
my brother are
Yeah.
really tight. So he's doing great things with the Washington Capitals and everything else in town too. So he'll be taking over the day to day stuff, whatever they need from him.
Um, Dante, I was reading that Graham Townsend and the impact that he had on you as an aspiring player. And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I think I had read that you had said that you saw somebody that looked like you in the National Hockey League. The impact that had, and unfortunately, there hasn't been probably as many players of color as we'd all like to see, but it's one thing to have an individual player. It's another thing to have a team that represents you, and you're going to lead that team. And it's the first time that from my estimation, that we've had that, at an aspirational level, at the collegiate level, for young players. I can only imagine. You talk about the booster that you had, the interaction with the woman that was really proud that the school brought in a hockey program, but didn't know a lot about the game. Just early on, and again, this program is less than a year old. How much of an impact has it made already in the hockey community, and maybe just inspiring some kids and families to whether it's getting their kids into hockey or providing some inspiration to kids that say, "Hey, I can do that. I can, if I put my nose down, I can achieve that level."
Well, before I answer the question, obviously you brought up Graham Townsend. I have to give him his flowers. He's a second dad, third dad, next to Neil Henderson and my grandfather. A phenomenal human being that I have seen literally give literally the shirt off of his back to people. He is the most selfless human being. He doesn't need to be. He's achieved the highest of heights. He's played in the National Hockey League. He's coached in the National Hockey League. He runs a very successful hockey school in the summers in Maine. But he does it the right way. And again, you talk about the examples that you have: Neil Henderson with the hugs, Graham Townsend with being who he is. When you have somebody that has done what he's done, look at you in your face and say, Dante, I know you still want to play, but when you're finished playing, you might want to try coaching hockey, because I really think that you
Is
could
he the
be
one that
off.
planted that seed?
So that was here's the story. I'm training in Toronto at Twist Whitby. Shout out to Jeff and everybody there. And Graham Townsend is in town for the Team Jamaica tryouts, and I didn't know. I'm black. I might have thought I might have had some Jamaican blood.
Yeah.
That event is also the reason why I now have a relationship with my father. So I go to this Team Jamaica tryout on money that I have raised from GoFundMe to go and train in it at Twist Whitby. And I don't have enough money after the event to get back because the GO train had shut down. So I didn't have a way to get back. And
Yeah.
Graham Townsend, who I had spoken to a couple times during this event because he's the coach of the team, hears about my situation, just happens to walk past and they say, "Hey, Graham, are you driving past Whitby? Because Dante doesn't have a way to get back." And he's like, "Oh, yeah, he can ride with me. Instead of me going down Buffalo, I'll go up Montreal way and drive back to Maine." So we stop off because he's hungry. He's a bigger guy. He gets hungry to eat at one of his favorite diners. And as we're speaking, I tell him about my GoFundMe and my story and all these other different things. He's like, "I could donate to your GoFundMe," which he actually didn't. He said, "I could, or I could bring you out next summer and have you work my hockey school so you can learn the business of hockey school. So at some point in time in the future, when you're done playing, if that's something you want to do, at least you have a way to stay in the game." So I'm like, man, I really could have used $100 or $200 or whatever it was. But I also am like, you know what? No, I love the fact that's his offer. So we end up leaving this place and he drives me past where he grew up. And it's the projects in Toronto. And he shows me the balcony where he used to work out. And he also shows me across the street. He tells me all these different stories. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm literally looking at a guy that lived a life just like mine growing up. And
Yeah.
he said that next summer when I get there, he's like, "The reason I wanted you to come is because I wanted somebody that's working as hard as raising money on GoFundMe, figuring it out. That's what I want around my athletes." So I'm coaching a Chowder Cup game with him that summer. And afterwards, we're at the rink with Jack Eichel trains. I can't remember exactly, Foxborough probably.
Yeah.
And we're standing outside next to the van. He's like, "Dante, I know that you still want to play, but just take it from me. I've been around some Hall of Fame players and coaches. When it's time, I want you to consider coaching because I think you have what it takes. You'll learn the X's and O's, but
Wow.
the character side of it, I really
Yeah.
think you have what it takes." And from that moment on, he looks like me. He's from where I'm from. He's achieved what it is that I want to achieve. I'm going to listen to that human being. So that's I always have to give Graham his flowers because he didn't have to do that. But I'm so grateful that he did. So it's just back to the question when it comes to what does this mean for hockey or how has it impacted hockey? Everybody that I have this conversation with, NCAA, NHL, youth hockey, everybody is so excited to see this because it just shows growth in our sport, a
Totally.
sport that has been beaten up in the past for the way it appears and the way people may act and this and that. Everybody just loves once you've been a part of the game. Everybody loves this game, and to see it grow to a point where an HBCU recognizes the importance of the game and what it means to the history of just the world that they want to have it on campus. Like that's just so when we spoke earlier, full circle moment about individuals coming from Edina or Calgary or South Korea or Europe or wherever um, to represent and wear the logo of an HBCU on their jersey is the dream of a Willie O'Ree or a Anson Carter or Martin Luther King or Sojourner Truth or anybody. Like this is, and you could even go further than that. Gary Bettman, like people have worked to grow the game and to create opportunities for people that the game traditionally wasn't seen to be for. And it's here. The moment is here. And this won't be the last one. My hope is that the game just continues to grow because it's such an awesome game and so many people need to experience it.
Oh man. Well said. Dante, listen, man, I want to, I'm fortunate that I get to do this. I get to have these conversations every week and they're really impactful on myself. But I just want to say, like, I appreciate you calling out the people in your life that have supported you, whether it's from your mom to Neil Henderson to Graham Townsend, and I think that's just a good reminder for myself and everybody to take advantage of those moments to celebrate the people that helped you. And you talked earlier about maybe the hand of God or divine intervention. Just following this conversation, no question that the right person is leading this program, and not just the impact and shepherding that impact that it's going to have in the Nashville community, but as you said, just hockey as a whole. So congrats, and go Tigers, man.
Yeah, thank you so much. And honestly, thank you so much for everything that you've done in the past. I used to use your website with my players often. I would make them get subscriptions because what you do for the coaching space is phenomenal. And it's something that hats off to you and flowers to you, because you are truly making this next generation of coaches and players as well that much greater for what it is that you do on a daily basis. So thank you.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you.